I'd like to introduce you to Hank. Hank is a dog I'm going to be working with over the next 2 weeks, and I'm going to be making a mini series. Some of Hank's issues are reactivity and aggression towards dogs, intense leash biting. He scent marks on pretty much everything inside and outside the house. He pulls like a truck, destructive behaviour, and also he's got no prior formal training. As this series develops, you guys can hopefully follow along and you can watch as we progress with Hank, and you can see his training from the start to the finish. I'm going to be explaining this as I go along so you can see my training sessions with Hank and then understand my thought process behind the reason I'm doing certain things. Alright, let's get started. This is day 2 of working with Hank. After our first day, I thought the most important thing we need to work on is the leash biting and the leash pressure and leash work in general. Right here you can already see he immediately starts going for the lead, and then I reward him for stopping biting the lead. So this is also first thing in the morning, so I am a little bit rusty, but I'm just sort of warming up, getting into it, doing a little bit of basic obedience, not worrying too much, and just getting him used to having the lead on him. And this is something I've realised now, but I didn't realise it at the time. Hank can usually do about 1 minute on lead before he starts getting pretty bitey. And also I have put him on the harness for this because I wanted to see if it made a difference, whether the harness or the collar or if it's a slip lead. So I was still trying to figure out what exactly triggers it and why he does it. After about a minute of just walking around, getting him used to the lead, reward him for engaging with me, I decided I would test him out on the collar. I wanted to experiment a little bit more and see if we can get down to the root issue with it. When I swap him over to the collar, you immediately see he starts getting very bitey very, very quickly, even though there's no leash pressure on it. So this could be because of the duration, but it could also be something else. I think Hank's about 4 years old, so we are working with a dog that has been doing the same thing that we know of from the previous 4 years. It's not going to be a very quick fix. It's going to take a long time to get through this, but I'm hoping we can make as much progress as possible in the 2 weeks that I'm working with him. So because he starts getting super, super bitey on the lead, I then swap him back over to the harness. Straight away, it didn't seem to really be a difference. What I did notice is when I drop the lead, he stops doing the behaviour. I do wonder if this is something he's taught himself. If he bites the lead comes onto the floor and it disengages it. So he's got some strong frustration or emotion to do with the lead. When he's in that state as well, I didn't think it'd be worth carrying on training. I didn't think there'd be any real effective training I could do with him unless I waited it out with him on lead. So I'm like, cool, prioritise that. Let's move over to the Tug of War game so that I can start teaching him how to drop it. I should also say as well, I'm not ignoring the behaviour of the lead biting. I'm trying to break it down and build it up into increments so we can then really work on it. Not everyone's going to agree with this method, and that's absolutely fine. There's thousands of ways you can teach the dog the same thing. However, if you really break it down, we have got reinforcement, which allows us to reinforce a behaviour, and you've also got punishment, which reduces the behaviour. I could use negative punishment in the situation, which is pretty much dropping the lead and it stops the behaviour, but the issue with that is if Hanky's doing this out of frustration because he's not getting his way or whatever, and I drop the lead, that's only going to keep reinforcing the behaviour because he learns that's how it stops. So there's something I could mess around with, but I think teaching him a drop it command and then being able to get him to switch on and off from Tug of War would be great, and it'd help out in the long run. He's already doing the behaviour, so I'm not 100% reinforcing the behaviour because it's already happening. So at least then I can turn it on and off, and he understands that there's a time and place and he's still getting that outlet. Okay, so that's my reasoning behind doing what I'm doing. If you want to listen more, I did talk about it in my first video, so you can check that out as well. At the start, you'll notice as well his drop command isn't very good, but watch till the end, around about 6 minutes, you can see a massive difference within just doing that for a few minutes. With this example as well, you notice my hand is in the treat pouch. This is poor training on my part. Hank will then start associating drop with my hand has to start in the pouch and come out to give him a treat. So that's something I need to sort of stop. So I need to hold the treat in my hand, ready to use a drop cue, and then reward him the second he actually drops it. But holding your hand in the treat pouch is just not good training. It sends too many mixed signals, and also the dog 100% expects a reward. And this is how you can get dogs to pretty much only start listening to you when you have a treat. Eventually, we do want to reduce the amount of treats they get so that they still do the behaviour And at the start of this as well, I'm making a big motion and throwing a treat on the ground so he gets to chase it and he gets to do that. I would like to eventually not have to do that, but this is early stages to build him up. What I am doing is I'm teaching him the word play, and I'm using that to start a game of Tug of War. By using the word play to start tug session, I'm able to then teach him play means we can play, we can do Tug of War, and then drop means you drop whatever's in your mouth, and we can switch between those two. And while we're doing this as well, I'm also teaching him wait and sit, and then bringing him out of that. It's very minor obedience, I'm not focusing on that, but that's just like a nice little bonus to get him into it. What you're about to see in a second, I made another mistake. I used the word yes to reward with Tug of War, and this was a questionable decision. So with a lot of the dogs I work with, I use yes, and that means you can play. However, with Hank, I would like to have it have a bit more of a clear definition of this means play, yes just is a reward. And eventually we can change and shape that. But right now, I think for Hank, it will be much, much simpler if yes simply means food or ball, and play means you get to play a Tug of War. That is for him as an individual, and as a mistake on my part, I did it once more during this training session, and then after that, I sort of try and phase it out. You do need to be very self-aware when you're dog training. If you're not paying attention to yourself, you don't know what you're doing wrong. And that's something else I noticed as well when I was watching this back and while I was actually training, is I wasn't consistent with my timings and my body language. You notice I've been teaching drop in multiple different ways. This isn't good. Every single time I should be lifting my hand up, throwing it on the ground, so that encourages that, but I'm trying to push it a little bit too fast by saying the word without the body cue. It would be much more effective if I did this for one day, then the next day I do that half, and then I try and experiment to then get it down and down and down and make it simpler and less effort. Up until I say drop, he drops whatever's in his mouth, and then I reward him. So we do need to be paying attention to yourself, and if you are interested in dog training, film yourself. You'll see a massive, massive improvement. Check out this drop here. So much better compared to when we first started 3 or 4 minutes ago. And I think he gives me another good one. Yep. And because he does a better job, we reward the dog more for the better job that they do. This is massive, massive improvements considering we've only been doing this for probably in total about 10 to 15 minutes. 5 minutes the day before and about 5 to 10 minutes today. Hank is a very smart dog, which is really, really helpful with this. With this drop as well, the reward comes from the pouch. It should be in my hand ready, and this is another mistake that I made. And overall, again, I'm not being consistent enough, which means Hank's progress will be slightly slower. What I did before is he dropped it on his own without me asking, so then I reward it. That's a technique called shaping. So shaping is rewarding a dog for a behavior that you didn't ask them to do and they just did on their own. The more you reward their behaviors without you asking, the more likely they'll repeat it on their own. It's probably one of the best way to train dogs because they think it's their idea in the first place rather than always directly coming from you. This is what I use to teach dogs how to be calm inside. Every time they relax, they lay down, they go to their bed, they instantly get more rewards in a very calm way, and this just reinforces them being calm around the house. So in total, this session was about 10 minutes, and I assumed he'd be pretty tired by this point, so I decided I would try and do a little bit more lead work with him, carry on from where we started off. As soon as I put on the lead, he goes straight into biting. This could be because he was amped up from still playing Tug of War, but yeah, I was very, very wrong about him being tired and not wanting to bite it. So one of the things that worked in the past when I was working with another dog, admittedly it was a golden retriever, which makes a lot of sense, but it's also worked with another dog as well, is you give them a job to do and something to hold. So I thought I'd test it out with Hank, give him a ball to hold, and see if he can just not bite the lead while he's holding the ball, and hopefully we could do a little bit of work like that and just get him used to following the lead while he's got a ball in his mouth. The lead is quite slimy at this point. He's got a lot of foam, which is pretty gross on a leather lead, and Hank's also quite clumsy, so he dropped the ball. I expect him to go over it, which is why I flipped the lead over the top of him so he could go and get it. This then triggered this response. So because this just keeps happening and this is day 2, I'm like, I'm actually just going to wait and see how long it takes him to stop the behaviour. Turns out, as long as I was holding the lead, he was not going to stop. So this went on for about 1 or 2 minutes, and after realising he's just going to keep carrying on, I decided I would intervene and see what I could do and maybe test out drop to see if drop would work. And it sort of worked. So it sort of worked once my hand was actually there, ready. But again, he's sort of following a treat pouch from earlier. But either way, he stopped the behaviour. And he was able to sit and refocus, which is great. It's a little bit of progress, nowhere near where I want. And as you see, I pick up the lead, boom, straight back at it. I know that if I drop the lead, he stops with behaviour, which, and looking back, I think I should have dropped it more and just rather than allowing him to keep reinforcing it. But at the time I was like, I don't want him to be biting the lead because he's not getting his own way. So it was sort of like a battle of a pride and ego, which is dumb. Should have just kept dropping the lead. But I also want to make sure that I'm able to stop him when I'm holding the lead, because there's a safety risk out there, and having a long line just drag on behind you, it's not the best idea. What I decided is to end on a little bit of a positive note and grab the slip lead so we can do a little bit of leash pressure in a much more calming way, and just try and get him used to wearing multiple leads, having leads flipped over the top of him without him actually biting it. And overall it was pretty successful. To be fair, I probably will start doing this a bit more often because it's actually worked. So I'm pretty much trying to reward him for not reacting here. That's the goal. He listens to me, he gets a little bit of leash pressure, and he gets a reward for not reacting. But he was rewarding himself when I was just holding the lead. So I just need to think a little bit outside the box. It's pretty much what I spend the next few minutes doing, is just staring at him and thinking. This was all one training session. In total, I think it's probably about 15 minutes. And he did start making me a little bit frustrated, which is natural. So I just needed to clear my head and then figure out the next plan of action. So after giving Hank a bit of a rest, I decided I would then take him out for a walk. The reason I wanted to take him out for a walk is I wanted to see who he was as a dog and what his problems really were in the outside world. This isn't a training walk, it was purely to see what he does, and I let him pretty much do whatever he wanted to do, because I think when you give a dog more freedom, you can see who they really are. So as you can tell straight away, there's a lot of pulling, and he darts when he wants something. He really lunges towards it. Also, this is not how you should hold a lead properly. I'm holding it like this because I've got a camera in one hand and I want to make sure that he can't actually get anywhere in case he does do something. So you can see his pulling is pretty bad. And then we literally go down the road and we manage to see another dog. So I'm like, cool, I'll just wait around to see what his reaction is. And then this really cute little old lady comes out, so I'm like, okay, cool, we'll leave. I didn't want to intervene, but I was like, it's not fair to put the old lady under any stress. And that little bit of tension on the lead causes this to happen. I sort of just go along with it. As we know from earlier, I can drop the lead, which would work. Treats sort of could work, but I didn't want to practice dropping this situation because we're still working on it and it would pretty much be pointless. When I go down, you can tell we stopped, it's like, that's interesting, and then go straight back to being Donald Duck. This pretty much goes on for about 2 minutes, so I'm just going to fast forward it from here. He does eventually stop and he pretty much goes right back to normal, but obviously his emotional state is higher. So I take him to a park, which is like about another minute from where we were, and we see a dog in the distance. I'm like, this is great. I'm going to be able to see how he reacts at a further distance. But because of how the owner described his behaviour, I wanted to know if there was a distance that he could work in quite comfortably, and then we can do obedience and stuff like that. So there he's already seen the dog, and rather than engaging like he just did, even though his emotional state is much higher, he decides to disengage. This is absolutely amazing to know, and to be honest, after rewatching this, seeing these two things would have been enough for me to go back, and I probably should have, so he could have carried on training. But I decided I was going to keep taking him for a walk and just see how he gets on, and then tire him out for the rest of the day and then let him rest. Over there we have 2 sausage dogs, and he clocks them, gets a little bit tense, starts walking a little bit faster, and he disengages. I think the difference for this was he came into their space. Dogs have got a weird thing about who's coming into whose territory, and because they were standing still and we were passing through, I think that helped Hank settle. Now, I went to another field and I was like, this is great. Turns out there's a massive fair going on. And I was like, okay, I'll take him to smell. They're doing archery. We're sort of pinned in this corner and a dog walks past. And then we got to see Hank's full-on reactivity with another dog within about the 10 foot area. And then obviously it goes back into the lead biting. And now the interesting thing is, once we did this, We left for fair because there's way too much going on there. There's archery, football, screaming, dogs. So I was like, cool, let's take him that. And once we came out, he actually starts looking for the dog. This is what he's doing here. We followed the dog out. He didn't see the dog. But he knows which direction the dog went, and he actually came out and was searching for the dog. That's a really interesting thing to me. So I see her down the road, so I cross over and I just sort of follow her to gauge his reaction. Following dogs can be massively helpful when you're trying to desensitize your dog to other dogs. It makes your dog feel a lot more comfortable. So he's clocked the dog, but he's moved on. He's ready to go home, pulling like a truck. But that's absolutely fine. I did hear one trainer say that this is gaslighting a dog if you allow them to react and put them into a situation where they will react or show their aggressive side. The thing is, for me, is if you're a dog trainer and you've worked with clients, you know when they tell you information, they miss out key details that are super important to you, and unless you have like 100 questions to ask them, there's always going to be that little bit that is so helpful when you actually see the dog in that environment. And he's already rehearsed these behaviours. He's already doing it. I don't see there being a problem with him doing it one more time if there's no risk. I don't think it's going to reinforce the behaviour more than it already is. It's not going to make or break him, and it helps me understand Hank. With the very, very first reaction, I'm not sure if you noticed, but there was a second where I pulled a little bit on the lead. Not much at all, it wasn't a yank, it's just a gentle bit of leash pressure, and that is what caused him to explode. It's those sort of details that help me understand Hank, and then it can allow me to actually figure him out and work with him. I'm not trying to rile him up, I just want to see who he is as a dog, and then I can help him. And I think this is one of the biggest red flags in dog trainers on social media, is if they're telling you how to fix a problem, but they don't have a single video of them actually fixing the problem with a dog, it should start to raise a little bit of flags. So while today I didn't get a lot of hands-on training done with Hank, I was able to start understanding him a bit better. And understanding your dog is a massive, massive help. If you are interested in our first day and you haven't seen it yet, check that out here. I go into much more detail about laying down the foundation of dog training, and if you are interested in dog training at all, I think that'll be super, super helpful to watch. And if maybe you want a shorter video, there's one just here for you as well. Thanks for watching.